Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rage Against the System, Teens Who Don't Back Down with Samira Ahmed and Sabaa Tahir. That's the applause, yeah. My name is Sasa Aakil. I am an artist and a poet, and I have the great pleasure of moderating this panel with all of you and these amazing authors today. I'm used to saying artists. I go to art school. So I would like to invite all of you, as we're going through this panel, to think about any questions you may have. We're going to have a 10-minute question and answer at the end. So go ahead and think of those and write them down if you have any. Before we get into this, I'd also like to thank our sponsors for this event, because we couldn't have done it without them. And I would like to let you all know that there will be a book signing with these two amazing authors at 4 p.m. So I think we're ready to get into it. Are you ready?
We're ready.
Yes.
All right.
Very well.
So I'm going to start off with a question for both of you, then I think I'm going to alternate. Does that make sense? All right, so my very first question, how do you know each other? Because I know that you're both YA authors, but I've heard that you're connected in another way from before that.
Wait, do we know each other?
Do we know each other from before?
I don't know.
Do we?
Anyway, hi everyone.
Hello.
We're so excited to be here. Thank you all for coming out. And Sabaa and I have been frenemies for...
Yeah. We hate each other, actually.
We don't get along at all.
We don't call each other on the phone and talk for...
We don't text all the time.
Yeah. Our husbands aren't like, are you cheating on me with her?
Yeah.
That's not what happens.
Not at all, ever.
Yeah, we don't like each other. Anyway.
Well, let's see, how did we... I can't even...
It was
y'all West.
It was a y'all... I don't remember how we met. It just felt like we'd always known each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
It did, because she's like my cousin's sister.
You know what I think it was? I feel like someone thought we were related. And then I think we rolled with that.
Yes, I think that's what it was.
We were like, yeah, they're the same person. I wrote Internment.
Right, and I wrote Ember.
You wrote an Ember in the
I
Ashes.
do get questions about Ember. Like, I think that was like before you had announced the title for book 4.
Yeah, and I was like, you should tell them like really insane things.
Yeah, so somebody at one festival, someone came up to me and they're like, oh my God, I love the Ember series. And I said, so do I. And I was like, oh wait, I think they thought I was Sabaa, and now it's gonna seem like I'm really conceited.
I support that though. I want you to be like, Sabaa, I am gonna name it,
I was like,
Monkey in a Barrel. That's
I
the
wanted
title.
Samira to be in the title, and then Sabaa just completely refused.
Yeah, I was thinking
I don't know why.
It wasn't me,
There's
it was
so
my
much
publisher.
banter going on right now. I love it.
So but I will tell one like sort of sappy story about Sabaa, which is before we met each other and before I had been published, I went to a BA Book Expo America BookCon event. It was in Chicago, and I was going up the escalator. I had just been agented, and I think I had just gotten an offer on my first book, Love, Hate, and Other Filters. And as I was going up the escalator, there's this giant banner of Sabaa's face hanging down.
Yeah.
And I was really moved. I was like, oh my God, Sabaa is like the rainbow of my festival, because I just felt, it was to me just so amazing that there's this Desi Muslim author who has this giant poster of her beautiful, brilliant face like right there, and it made me feel very proud.
So then she got the spray paint that night. And she went in there and she just went to town.
She's just deflecting because she's trying to be humble, but I felt very proud at that moment, and also just like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I could meet her one day? And then I did.
I love how you can be inspired by each other and then also kind of make jokes at each other's expense. And
that's our favorite part.
Messy love, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I know I said I would hit you with one for both and then go to individual, but I actually want to hit you with one for both of you again. And this is really preliminary. You don't have to go into too much detail, but let me know how or does your book, and respectively, reflect your experience as a Muslim American?
Oh gosh. I'll go, I guess.
Yeah, go for it.
So first of all, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sabaa Tahir. I am the author of 2 types of books. One is a fantasy series called An Ember in the Ashes, very violent. One is,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. One is another book called All My Rage. Clearly I have a problem. I write these very angry books. And I would say that I see more of pulling my Muslim identity into All My Rage because it's a contemporary story. I was able to talk about faith, the role that faith plays. And what I tried to do is I kind of grew into adulthood in the aftermath of 9/11, and I saw a lot of Islamophobia and was treated to a lot of Islamophobia. And in the media didn't see a ton of positive depictions of what faith in general can do. So not just necessarily Islam, but any faith. And I wanted to write a book that wasn't just like, yeah, pro-faith, but that allowed the characters to explore how faith could be a positive force in their life, but one that they could still question.
I love that.
And so that is why I incorporate it, and that's kind of how I approached faith as a young person, is that it was something that I could ask questions about and learn about and sort of constantly be evolving in without feeling judged. And so the point of All My Rage is to really present it in a way that's very non-judgmental, so that anyone at any part in the journey of finding sort of where they are within a faith can feel comfortable.
Yeah, and I really feel like you had different characters that reflected those different parts in the journey. I love that. How about you, Samira?
So I have written a number of YA novels. Love, Hate, and Other Filters was my first book. Internment. My most recent book is Hollow Fires. And I've also written a middle grade fantasy duology. The second book is coming out in a couple weeks. And for both of those types of books and for both of those ages, especially for my YA, a lot of it does focus around identity. But for me, as a Muslim growing up in America, it's not like faith is siloed. It's just a part of my everyday life and everyday experience. And it's been, I think for Muslims, we don't think of our religion, I guess, as something completely separate. We see it as like, just a way of life, like how it informs our worldview. And I wanted to explore characters who, had different worldviews and are asking questions and also just trying to find their way in the world. Like all of my characters are these young women, I like to refer to them as revolutionary girls, who are finding their own path, finding their own voice, and learning to use it for something positive and good. Because I also grew up in a time, I'm a little bit older than Sabaa. She just rubs that in all the time, too. So I grew up in a time where my first experience with Islamophobia was actually the Iran hostage crisis. And there were many fewer Muslims in the United States in the 70s. And I wanted to also talk in all of my novels about how that informs both the parenting of the teens who are in the books and how that it informs just their experience in general. But also, they're girls just like every other girl. They have hopes and dreams and everything else, and I just wanted to write about life.
Yeah, and I love that, especially you mentioned, this is not a question, but I knew I wanted to say it. You mentioned how it impacts the parenting, and I love how you included in your book that your character's love of truth and justice came from her parents. And for me, that was really touching because I can relate to that experience. So my question for you, Samira, why was it important for you to illustrate the difference between truth and then facts, and then alternative facts as well, but specifically those two, because you spend time at the beginning of each chapter talking about, what's true and what's a fact.
Right, so Hollow Fires is essentially, it was inspired sort of by a true crime podcast. Are there true crime podcast fans out here? Yeah. But also very much about the times. Like I feel like all art is political and all of my writing is political in that vein, but my main character is a young investigative journalist. And right now I feel like in society we've really been bombarded by this notion of like fact and alternative fact. And in reporting, especially because I listen to so many of those true crime podcast and read so much about it, I was always interested in how sometimes the facts seem to fall a little bit short of what the larger truth is, and how I wanted her to be able to investigate how disinformation is spread and how much of a force it is right now in our lives, and why so many people want to hide the truth, and what the effects of hiding the truth are, and what it means for this young woman to say, I want to stand up and have this whole truth be exposed, and what kind of danger she's put in. So I really feel like that is just those things are such important elements that our young people are grappling with. And I just wanted to have, to speak to that in this novel.
Yeah, and I love that because the journey of the entire book, I was not prepared for that, by the way, just the turns and all the plot I guess, surprises. But very much in that was everything that you just addressed, so that was awesome. Sabaa, one thing that I noticed really quickly as someone who's also obsessed with music, that you talk about music and song, actually both of you do, but especially Sabaa talks about music and song in your book so much, and it's so much a part of Noor's character. So I want to know what you believe the power of music is and why you decided to include those songs that you did.
So much of All My Rage is inspired by my own youth. When I was in, I think, 8th grade, my dad threw out the television. He cut off the cable. He didn't throw it out, though he would have if my mom wouldn't have killed him. But he got rid of the cable, and he was like, "You guys need to study more, so no TV for you." And so my response to this was to listen to the radio all the time, because there was literally nothing else to do when I didn't want to study and I didn't want to read. So there was this station in Southern California called 95.5 KLOS. And hey, yeah, some people remember it. So KLOS was like an independent rock station at that time. And so they played, I'm aging myself here, but they played like Stone Temple Pilots and Nirvana and The Doors and, all the really good, angry, young dudes. So I started, I was also an angry young lady, but still angry and young. And so I started listening to this music, and it felt like this really wonderful, safe outlet for me. And I didn't necessarily feel like I had that in other places. Definitely didn't have that in school. Home generally felt like a safe place, but a part of that was the music. It was that I could, close the door and put on headphones, or even when I couldn't close the door, I could just put on headphones and I could go into this world. So I started making mixes when I was, 12, 13, and I started taking them with me when I went on trips. And music just became this obsession, really. I think that if I did not sound like a dying cat, I would have probably tried to become a rock star, guys. You
are a rock star.
Yeah, I am a rock star. So when I wrote All My Rage, I knew I had not gotten a chance to really put that into An Ember in the Ashes, because I was like, how do you work in a love of 9 Inch Nails into An Ember in the Ashes? I can't do this. And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna work in that love of music. And
I love that.
It was almost a way for me to thank some of these artists by being hopefully someone will go buy this song, by Benjamin Francis Leftwich, and enjoy it the way I have. So that's why I ended up working it in. And I've had actually a huge response to the music, because the music nerds, right? We get each other.
Yeah.
And so they'll be like, well, do you like the B-side, or do you, and so that's been really nice.
That's so cool, because I'm a bassist, and so a lot of the music that you referenced, I was like, oh my God, I was not expecting this. It
was pretty fun.
Follow-up question for my own curiosity. Do you play any instruments?
I played piano for 10 years.
Very nice.
And I don't remember any of it. And my mom, I would say once a week, will remind me that she paid for piano lessons for 10 years and I don't play anymore.
Oh, that's so sad. Hopefully you can get back into it at some point soon. And we can start a band.
Yeah, totally.
You can do keys and I'll do bass, and we'll get someone else to do lead guitar.
The singing, please.
Oh, yeah.
Samira, you can sing.
No, I'm terrible. I did play the violin for a very short period of time, and nobody was happier than my orchestra director that I quit.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question for both of you. I actually have two. So one of them is, again, for my own curiosity. So real quick, are you, either of you, poets? Because I noticed a strong poetic theme in your writing, but also, Sabaa, you decided to include a poem in its actual form, so.
I write, in my second book, Internment, the father is a poet, and I wrote all of his poetry for the novel. And I've always kind of written poetry for a large part of my life, and in fact, the first things I tried to sort of get published were poems, but it's very hard to get your poetry published, everyone. Yeah. So I was like, you know what? If you write a novel and then write a poem, then they're forced to put it in, and now you're a published poet.
That's a good hack.
So yeah, that's just a little life hack there for all the authors out there. But I really love poetry, and I try to incorporate it where I can. In fact, in my second book, the characters also play or refer to this Urdu poetry game called Bayat Bazi, which I learned growing up. And it's a game where like a big family picnic, say, and there's like 2 teams, and my aunties and uncles would be on the teams, and one team recites a line of poetry from heart, or people who love Urdu poetry just have memorized all Urdu poems. So they recite a line from heart, and the other team has to respond with another line of poetry that begins with the ending sound.
It's like a sing-off.
So cool.
Yeah, sort of like of
That's
what
so
that
incredible.
is. And so I kind of grew up around poetry and going to Urdu mushairas, like poetry readings. I would go long into the night. So it found its way into my life and into my works.
Wow, that's awesome. And that game sounds so fun.
And hard.
I would love that. I have so many poems in my head. Like, I would so love that. Go ahead, Sabaa.
Oh, I am not a poet. I have written
really?
poetry for a long time. It's so bad. It's like the emo part of myself that's still 13 and is really upset about everything. That is my poetry. So when I was young, I used to write about, how no one understood me, which no one did. And then now I've gotten older and I write, like sad poems about aging, so that's fun. But no, I do love poetry, and actually that's why I included a poem by Elizabeth Bishop. It's called One Art. It is, One Art is 6 stanzas, so it is actually each stanza is the beginning of each section of the book. There are 6 sections of the book. And the goal of including that was, 1, I love this poem, and I really wish more people read it and knew about it. But 2, I wanted to, the poem is about loss. The art of losing is not hard to master. So many things are filled with the intent to be lost that their loss is no disaster. That's like the first stanza of the poem. And these characters lose so much and are struggling with loss, and they're teenagers, and I do feel like that's a phase in life where a lot of things are lost, and of course things are gained as well, but it's such a period of change. And so I wanted to be able to demonstrate that, and I did not necessarily have those words because I had already read them somewhere, and I was like, I can't do better than Elizabeth Bishop in One Art. So that's why I included that poem. But for me, music is really the poetry that I feel most at home with.
Yeah, somehow I doubt that your poetry isn't good. Like, after reading your book, I feel like your poetry
I wish I had one on my phone that I could pull up, because I would love for you to be like, wow, that was terrible.
I promise you that won't happen, but maybe at the end, if we have time. My next question is in relation to both of your books, because you have these young people, these characters who are in these adverse circumstances, and they take power. And so they take back their power in small ways and in really big ways. We're not going to spoil what those ways are. But I'm wondering, what are some of the ways that you think young people in everyday life, young people in this crowd, me, can be powerful and impact ourselves and our communities?
I'm sure this is true for Sabaa too, but I'll let you speak for yourself. This one time. I think I'm very inspired by young people, and so when I was writing Hollow Fires, and I'm also a former high school English teacher, so teens are like really this group of people that I love the most. Gen Z is so inspiring to me. I think it's so important for young people to ask questions and to push back when the answers to those questions are unjust, when they are straight up lies, when they are told, we are censoring and banning these books for your quote unquote protection, when to me that's just a complete diminishment of democracy. I think for so long, throughout every generation, it's adults who are making decisions, and they are being imposed on young people, and young people, especially in our politics, don't often enough get to have a voice because they're literally not able to vote. And too often their opinion is like cast off as like being unimportant. Especially with this idea like, well, our children are the future. And so I feel like that gives adults like a lot of opportunity to just be like, so we don't have to listen to them. But I'm the opposite. Like, I think our children are our today. They are our now. And I think it's so important for adults to listen to them. So for young people, I just say, sometimes it's not always easy to like raise your voice really loudly, but find that first little step. Maybe it's in your community. Maybe it's like speaking out against somebody who's, a bully. Maybe it's speaking for someone or helping someone in a way who isn't able to quite help themselves. I always think it's great to just start with a small step, and then you can sort of find your courage.
I like to call that small justice, like holding ourselves to a standard that we hope to kind of spread throughout the entire world.
I love that phrase, small justice.
How about you, Sabaa?
I mean, I agree with everything that you've said. I think that we don't give enough credit to the small justices. I think that we don't realize that they're not small, actually, because if they affect even one person, they can really change things for that person's entire life. So I think a lot about my best friend growing up. She was constantly fighting on my behalf because she would get into scraps with people because they would say racist things, and she would not take it. And she knew, some part of her knew that I did not know how to stand up for myself. That is not something I was capable of doing as a kid. I was too afraid. I was like crippled by fear. And so she did this thing for me, and it was not easy for her either. It was not something that came naturally to her, but it was done out of love. And it has changed the trajectory of my whole life. I mean, it gave me courage later. It allowed me to stand up later. It allowed me to not fall in on myself. I mean, truly, that gift that maybe no one else would have noticed or cared about changed my entire life. And so I do think that concept of small justice is really important. And I also think about the things that matter to you. Don't take up causes if you don't feel connected to them. The things we're most passionate about are the things that come organically and naturally to us. And so I find that what worked best for me is when there were things that I truly cared about as opposed to things that maybe I was getting pressured into caring about. And that's when I could actually talk passionately about a subject and knowledgeably about it and research it on my own, and it didn't feel like such a chore. Because when you're a teenager, there's so many other things you've got to deal with, like your parents, and then if you have siblings, and then if you have family, and then if you have school, and you have classes, and you have tests, and you have all these things, it's like, wait, so now you're expecting me to be like a you know, also like a community organizer? You're expecting me to be like a revolutionary at the same time? Like, that's a lot to put on a young person. Young people should also be allowed to just be young people. They shouldn't have to stand up if they can't. And so I do think that that's also important, is like, if you can do these things, but if your version of standing up is getting from day to day, that is okay too. That is acceptable and fine, because we just need you to be in this world.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, I was just going to add that I just really hate that young people are forced to have to find their courage because of the choices that adults have made. We are so often putting things on our young people, and sometimes it is just like making it from
day to day.
And also, I think that, and this goes for adults too, finding that small thing, like Sabaa said, like, I don't think you need to feel like social justice guilt. Like, I can't fix everything in, you know, a day, but I'm thinking about this young person who lived just on my block at the start of the pandemic. He was a middle schooler, and he saw that the nursing homes nearby didn't have masks. Remember the one, there was a mask shortage at the beginning of the pandemic? So he asked his mom to teach him how to sew masks. And he sewed masks for the local nursing home.
Wow.
And then he got his friends into it, and he taught them how to sew. And they all got together. I mean, there was no school. They got together, and they were sewing these masks and distributing them to local nursing homes. How amazing is that?
Yeah, it really is.
This is a 7th grader. And
I could barely tie my shoes and stuff.
I mean, isn't that impressive?
It's all Velcro.
So.
I know. So I don't know. It's like that small justices thing is just such a wonderful way to look at it.
And I love how you also mentioned, Sabaa, the value of just getting through the day, because sometimes our mere existence is an act of protest.
That's right.
Yes.
So on kind of the topic of change and kind of dealing with our world, I have a question for you, Samira. Sorry. You very clearly in your novel name and condemn a lot of the systemic and intrinsic issues in this country that we live in. But at the same time, you attach a certain value with this American identity. And so I'm wondering, is there a specific ideal that you're identifying with that is someplace we have not reached yet and is kind of separated from the Islamophobia, the racism, and the xenophobia that kind of has formed our history thus far?
Well, you know, I think, you know, America is founded on an idea, right? The concept of Americanness. And there's many, many beautiful words in our founding documents. But basically forever, they haven't applied equally to all of us. And If America wants to fulfill that promise, we have to be an inclusive place. We have to be a nation of a big tent. We have to say, if this is a country of the people, for the people, and by the people, then all of us are the people. And I think also often about that phrase, in order to form a more perfect union. We are obviously not a perfect union. We have systemic racism, xenophobia, misogyny. We have, we see right now this persistent homophobia, transphobia, young people being attacked for their identities. And I just cannot, so this is a panel about rage anyway. That just ignites my rage so much because I believe progress should always be forward. And if we want to be a nation of progress in this century, that means every single kid has to know that they are loved and that they are valued exactly as who they are.
Thank you.
And it is so, I say this as a parent and as an aunt and as a writer and as an American. And I just invite every single American to really stand up for the young people in our lives.
Thank you so much for that answer. Wow.
That was powerful, wasn't it? Yeah? So my question for you, Sabaa. Your book it begins with a content warning, and it deals with a lot of topics that are sometimes viewed as difficult to trust young people with. And yet, you write about them in a very real way, and you don't shy away from them. And so my question for you is, what would you say to people who think that this book or these topics shouldn't be addressed to young people at all?
I think they don't give young people enough credit. I think that's actually part of why we have such a problem with censorship right now, why we have such a huge issue with adults deciding what children can read. What I don't understand is why can we not let a child read something and then do this amazing thing called have a discussion with them about it. If there's something you don't agree with or something you're confused about, read the book and then talk to the child in your life about that book. That is something that is worth your time. And it frustrates me. We were talking about rage, right? It really frustrates me when people are like, well, I don't have time to read the book. Trust me, you have the time. There are things you can remove from your life that you probably don't need, and you can take the time to read a book instead, or to read sections of a book, or to take the time to talk to a teacher and say, why are you reading this book? Can you tell me what about it made you decide to choose it for my child? These are my concerns. Instead of deciding for an entire group of children that none of them get to read a book because you are so insecure about your belief system that you don't actually even want to expose your child to something that's different. That boggles my mind. So I think that I gave a content warning at the beginning of the book because it is a book for children. I do not believe a child should have to open a book and be unpleasantly surprised by something that maybe they are not ready for. I have found that there have been readers who have said, thank you for that warning that allowed me to know that, at those parts, I needed to either have someone to talk to after or I needed to just be mentally prepared for them. I wish that there were books when I was reading as a kid that had that content warning that would have been helpful. But I also think that the books that maybe I read that discussed some of these things, they were all considered adult books. None of them were kids' books, right? And so I was reading them as a child reads an adult, and I wasn't understanding, right? And so my hope is that I have written about these topics in a way that allows kids to feel like they are seen and they are witnessed, and like whatever their truth is, it is accepted and witnessed, and there's love for them there. Very similar to what you were saying,
but it's also because like our young people are going through that. Like,
they're going through it. It's a real issue.
We can't hide it. And with the book bans, I know your books have been banned, my books have been banned. It really makes me so angry because those people it's not that they're both, number one, not reading it at all. They're basing like this banning and censorship on identity.
It's really interesting, some of the books that have been banned, because you look at them and you're like, why?
I know. I mean, listen, it's just, I mean, identities, a human's identity is not controversial. Like,
Right.
I mean, somebody being queer people exist. I mean, this is not something that's controversial. Muslims exist. I mean, I've had my books banned literally for, quote, other religious content. I was like, if you're calling me other.
Other religious content,
Yeah,
wow.
yes, this was in a district in Texas. And,
Wow.
Which is wild, because Texan librarians are some of the most badass librarians.
yeah, I mean, the Texas librarians are the ones
country.
who like started like freedom to read.
They're
I mean,
incredible,
it's just-
yeah.
I know, but it just really makes me so angry because it's like, well, you might not eat bread, but you're not burning down all the bakeries. So if you don't want to read this book, why are you trying to burn down libraries? You know, it just.
I do feel like if we tried to burn down all the bakeries, that'd be a real problem.
I know that would be terrible.
And I think that legacy of censorship is really culturally based. When you started talking about that, Sabaa, I was thinking of how a lot of Black authors have been banned and have been cut from all kinds of school reading lists because of language, because of using real slurs that we hear in our lives on the daily basis and things like that. So I think that's really powerful, and I didn't realize that other religious content was considered a valid reason to ban a book.
There are no valid reasons.
Fair enough, that is definitely true. So I think we're running low on time, and I'm really sad because we're having a good time talking. But I want to ask you one last question that's kind of just like a semantics type of thing. So both of you included words in your characters' native languages and then also in Arabic in your book. And I noticed that Samira, you didn't define all of them, while Sabaa, you decided to define most, if not all. So I'm wondering just what was the reason for those two different approaches, and can you tell us about that?
Honestly, I can't remember which specifically are the words that I use because I'm like a few books behind on this, but I think, you know, I've been writing YA contemporary for a while, and so I think for my first contemporary books, I was probably defining them a little bit more, and now it's just, I have worked on incorporating them into the context. And I also feel like Google is free. These are things that my characters would be saying. I mean, you know, I grew up speaking 2 languages in my home, and for many kids from immigrant backgrounds whose families speak different languages, like for example, like when we are speaking with our families, we might be speaking in 2 different languages in the same sentence. Mm-hmm. And so it's just
so cool to hear.
It's just kind of a natural part of life. And when I'm talking to my mom, and if I say something to her in part in English and part in Urdu, I don't then stop and say, this is what I meant by that Urdu phrase. So yeah, I guess I just was like, it's just part of the character's everyday life.
Yeah, and I think it created an interesting effect because for me, I didn't know all the Urdu words, but I knew the Arabic words. And so I kind of felt like I was relating and I was finding home in your characters in some cases, and in other cases I was learning. And so that was really cool for me. How about you?
Yeah, so I'm a little the opposite. I translated most of the phrases in my book because they were in Punjabi, and Punjabi is not a language easy to find on Google. Mm-hmm. I also really worried that there would be kids reading it who wouldn't have access to any translation. You know, it's like they might not have a phone, and so I really wanted anybody to be able to pick up this book and read through and not be stopped by that. And also hopefully kind of realize that translation isn't really a very complicated thing. It can be, it 100% can be. I mean, I'm not denigrating the work of translators at all, but within the context of this book that, you know, they can sort of be in the club with me, the cool Punjabi, and learn some of these words and enjoy the full experience of the book, and they don't have to be Punjabi to have that experience, because I do get tired sometimes when I have to keep looking stuff up, because I really just, I'm like a greedy reader. I just want to eat the book, like I want to eat the story, you know?
Consume it all, yeah.
So I want it all at once. So I was I was thinking about that as I translated everything. But I did make sure that the words that I used were, the translations were in italics as opposed to the Urdu or Punjabi words, because I didn't want to other the Punjabi words. I wanted them to feel like a natural part of the conversation, and the translation to feel like a step away.
Yeah, like a subtext kind of thing, subtitles.
But I think there's different authors choose to do it in different ways, and it's really, especially now because we're moving away from italicizing those words in our books, like the Punjabi or Urdu words, because it's not italicized for your character. Yeah. And it's nice to be able to not feel othered that way.
I think there are two different approaches, and they're both, I think the fact that you both put so much thought into those different approaches means that they both have value. And I just want to thank you so much for talking with me, because your answers have been amazing, right, everybody? Their answers have been amazing. So for the next 10 minutes, I'd like to welcome up our team interviewer, Nandini, and she will come and ask you guys a couple questions, and then we'll move into the Q&A. Sound good, everybody?
Yep. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, I am Nandini. I am a teen interviewer. I was an intern with the Library of Congress this summer, and I'm going to be asking some questions. So I have a question for both of you to start off with. So both of you grew up in South Asian households. How important do you think it is to provide commentary on taboo issues like your books do?
Oh, I think it's essential, because I don't think we always get that from our parents, you know? I don't think I would understand like how most of life worked if I had just gone based, I mean, love my parents, they're great. But like, if I had just gone based on what my parents taught me, there are a lot of like things that I would have learned in a very like awful and unpleasant way. And I think that books is really what, I mean, like every romance book, thank you, all you romance authors who like taught me how stuff worked, because like I would not have gotten that from my parents, right? So from simple stuff like that to like the more complicated, like, oh, I'm not alone. Oh, this thing has happened to somebody else. Oh, someone else has experienced this feeling. All of that is really important. And I have two children. I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I think I like have overcorrected, and now we talk about like everything, and they're just like, ew, gross. So I'm sure there's a middle ground somewhere, but.
Yeah, I think mine's similar. I mean, I also completely overcorrected with my kids. They're like, oh my God, can you stop talking about those things, Mom? No. But I think I love what you said about like you want to make your reader feel like they're not alone. I think for me, I mean, I grew up, we were the first Indian family and the first Muslim family to live in my town. Wow. There was literally an article about us in the newspaper. The Indians are here. No, not those Indians, these Indians, you know? And so I think for me, it was a pretty obviously isolating experience, and I hope that I can give that sense of a character, a person feeling like they're not the only one. And I think probably one of the most amazing experiences as an author is when readers come up to you and can share how they relate to that part of the book. And I remember I spoke at this one school, and this young woman whose family, they were refugees from the Ukraine. This was a while ago, but she came up to me and she said, you know, I'm not Indian, I'm not Muslim, but the way this character was interacting with their parents, I could relate to it so much. So thank you for writing that. And that's just such a great feeling.
Yeah, and your books have really helped with sort of not normalizing, but introducing these issues to people in the community. So it's really helpful. Okay, so I have some individual questions now. So Sabaa, first for you. I've heard this book has been a side project for a while now. So what inspired you to give this book to the world at this time?
Oh gosh, like internal rebellion. My other book was due, and I was like, you know what? Why don't I make my life like really complicated and not do the book that I'm contracted for or that they're expecting, and instead finish this book that I've been writing for years that has been driving me insane. And that no one has asked for, right? So like, I think when I sent it, they were like, what is this? This is not book 4 in the Ember series. What are you sending us? So one, to make my life complicated, because I enjoy doing that. And two, in 2017, somebody who was in my life overdosed. They were a Pakistani person, and they passed away. And it was a really, really difficult experience. It was most chilling to see the family's reaction to it, because the family did not admit or confront or face the fact that this was an overdose. Officially to everyone, it was a car accident. And it really threw me. That response to it was very, very, very shocking to me and also really sad. But I understood. I understood where they were coming from. It was about saving face. It was about being able to still stand up in the community. And I don't think it should be that way. And I think that there are a lot of things that we should talk about, whether it's alcoholism in the Muslim community, whether it's abuse in the Muslim community, whether it's drug use and addiction in the Muslim community that we don't get a chance to talk about. And so that was the other thing that happened, and I felt like I had to tell this story as a result.
Yeah, those are amazing reasons, and also very compelling. And then the next question is for Samira. This question is from Mahir, who was one of my fellow interns. So you stated that Hollow Fires was inspired by the slaying of 14-year-old Bobby Franks in 1924. How did you come across this story, and why did you choose to write about it in the way that you did?
Hollow Fires is loosely based on really like 3 crimes. And one of them is the 1924 murder of Bobby Franks. Some people know it as the Leopold and Loeb murder. It was actually pretty famous because it was considered the first affluenza defense. Clarence Darrow, who is a very famous lawyer, Scopes Monkey Trial, you might have heard of him, actually defended these 2 young men with sort of an affluenza defense, which is they're so rich they didn't know what they were doing, which seems to be something that also is an excuse used in Congress these days. So I first came across that crime actually in college. I went to University of Chicago and that crime took place very nearby. The 2 people who committed the crime were university students, and so I just found it very fascinating because it was also, they were very early, like, sort of like almost murder celebrities. Like one of them was sort of good looking and was getting all of this like fan mail. And I found that so horrifying, but I mean, if you look, for example, there's like Hot Felon Friday on Twitter where mugshots of like hot felons are like put on Twitter and like people are, I was like, these are people who have hurt other people, and I just found it fascinating how it felt very contemporary, even though it was like in 1924, and so it's a very fascinating sort of crime to me and everything around it.
Yeah. Okay, so this one is more about both of you. What's your favorite part about how you grew up, and how did that translate into your writing?
I sort of talked about it already, which was the music, but also food. So I'm very lucky. I have a Punjabi Pakistani mom who's a very, very fantastic cook. Maybe if she sees this, she'll forgive me for all the other things I've said, because I've said that. She's the best cook in the world. Mom, you're the best cook in the world.
That's my line.
And I never, ever had to, like, friends would come to my house because they would just eat like pot pies every day for dinner, and like I didn't like, to me a pot pie was like an event, right? Like you like put it in the microwave and it's done in 3 minutes. Oh my God, it's magic, right? But they were like, no, your mom cooking an actual meal for you every night, like that's the magic. So I think that was my favorite part of my childhood. Also going to Pakistan, and this is a memory that I put in the book. I like the first time you go to a mango party in Pakistan, where basically everyone gathers. If you're lucky, you get these big barrels of iced mangoes, and then that's all you eat for like a whole meal, is you peel these mangoes and you stuff your face with them. And it is one of the most beautiful, profound experiences. So those are the favorite things of my childhood.
South Asians can talk about mangoes for
don't get us started.
A very long time. Like, I could just be here like, Sabaa, oh my God, last month I had a mango. It was so juicy.
Yeah.
And she's going to be like, oh, Samira, in April, I got this mango. Yeah. It was super juicy and not
deeper
fibrous.
than that, though, right? Like, we'll be like, well, did you try the Thai mango compared to the Mexican mango?
I know. Oh, totally. But my mom will bring over mangoes, and she'll be like, these are the Mexican mangoes. These are better than the other ones that were at this grocery store. And I'm like, okay, thanks, Mom. So food was also obviously a big thing for me. My mom is also an amazing, amazing cook. She still cooks for me and brings food over. And I know, my kids are like, is Nani coming over with food? And I was like, don't act like I'm starving you because my parents will yell at me. And I actually incorporated some of my mom's food into my books. In fact, in the first book, I talk about keema parathas, and it was really awesome because a reader was like, oh, this was so good. I found this keema paratha recipe, and I made it based on like what you had explained in the book, and then I showed it to my mom. I was like, Mom, this person was inspired to make keema parathas because I mentioned this in the book about your keema parathas. And she looked at it and she's like, it doesn't look that good. And I was like, Mom, it's very tough love with South Asian moms, you have to understand. I was like, just let's A for effort. Yeah. But yeah, the food was a big part of it. Family, I had a ton of cousins. We all hung out, and I guess there is like, I think this is like why our friendship is there. There's like a shorthand between Desis that is just so fun, like the mango shorthand.
Yeah.
It's.
And there's also just the moments where like, when you're in a town with not a lot of brown people, and then you meet that like one other person who is minority like you. Like I still remember one of my best friends in middle school and high school was black. And there were so many times where we would just look at each other and we knew. And I remember one of these times was at a wedding. And I was like, do not look at me. The entire church is silent. If you look at me, I'm gonna start laughing. And I'm like sitting there and I feel her whole body shaking, right? Because she's like, and I don't remember what we were laughing at. It was like something just spectacularly like white in the church service. And she's like trying not to laugh, and I'm trying not to laugh, and like my face is like probably turning red. And I mean, it was such a, I think back on it now, and like that experience is so special and so wonderful. Even if you're again, finding those allies, finding your people in these places where maybe you feel very alone.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Those are all my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if we can have a hand for Nandini as well. So I hope you've all been thinking about questions, because for the next 10 minutes, we're going to do a Q&A from all of you. So hands are welcome. You can also come up to the microphone.
Hi, my name is Cameron. I'm 11 years old, and my question is, what inspired you guys to write stories, and what was that journey like, especially growing up in communities where there weren't a lot of people who looked like you? How was your journey to like writing stories?
Awesome question. Do you like to write stories?
Yes, I do.
I just felt like I couldn't not write. So other people would like go hang out with their friends, and I would just want to stay in my room telling stories. And then ultimately, I got an idea that I couldn't stop thinking about. And I just kept working on it and kept working on it. And then all of a sudden, it was like a chapter. And then it became 2 chapters and 3. And then eventually, I realized like, oh, I think I have a book idea. So it can start with something really small, as simple as like an image in your head, a scene in your head, a question of like, what if this happened? So for me, it was, what if a girl's brother got taken from her? Like, what would she do? And that's where my story started. So just asking yourself that question can be a really wonderful way to start a story. So that's how it started for me.
I mean, I didn't really dream of being an author when I grew up. Like a lot of authors are like, I dreamed of being an author since I was 7 years old and I used to write, which I think is amazing if you do that. And like you love to write stories now, I think that's so cool. And I just want to encourage you to keep doing that. I always loved the idea of story, but I never imagined myself as being an author until much later in life when I got this idea for a story, and it kind of gets like stuck in your head. There's a song you might hear and it's just over and over in your head. And the only way to stop it was to write it. And I thought, I wonder if I can make this into a book. And for me, I think story ideas can come to me from anywhere. So one thing that I like to do is I always have a little notebook on my phone. And if I see a little tiny seed of inspiration, I always just write it down, because you never know where you can get inspiration from.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Hi, so I have a question for Sabaa.
Yes.
I'm sorry, this is like so weird because I remember reading Ember when I was in 6th grade, or like 8th grade, and now I'm a sophomore or a junior in college.
Whoa.
And so I remember as I was reading like your book series, you talk about really tough real life issues such as like genocide, refugees, and forced migration. And so I was wondering, what was it like trying to research these like real life issues and write about them in a way that's like respectful, informative, and sensitive, but still kind of incorporate that into your like your narratives for your stories and like keeping it, I guess, like entertaining for readers at the same time?
That is a great question. So I think that this is why my books took so long to write. There was a lot of research. I remember reading human rights reports, reports on prisons, and that was like one of the darkest like bits of research I had to do. Like I had to keep stopping and being like, I can't, and then I'd have to restart again. I think what I ended up doing is trying to figure out like what is the essence of what I want people to take away from this, or how I want this to be related to the story. And I would try to draw that out as opposed to dwelling on maybe a lot of really gruesome details or things that, I didn't want people to get mired in. I also would always put the characters front and center. So like my question is always like, what is their goal? Are they working toward it? What's standing in their way? Like those are the things, these are just craft concepts, like writing, the craft of writing. And when I would think through those things, usually, even though I would be discussing stuff that was very difficult, it would always be through the eyes of people, the eyes of characters. And that allowed me to almost put up a buffer between what was happening and what we were reading, because it allowed us to see it through the eyes of a character who we as people create those buffers for ourselves at times, because the horribleness of what we're dealing with on a daily basis can sometimes be so much that we have to separate ourselves a little bit. So that is kind of how I approach writing about those difficult things, because it is a young audience, and I wanted people to be aware of what was happening, but I didn't want them to be turned away from hope, which is such a huge part of the story. And so weaving that through, that's sort of my final thing that I did, is weave through hope throughout the story, because I was inspired by the stories I read as a newspaper editor working here at the Washington Post. And every single one of those stories, even the stuff that was very, very, very difficult to read, there was always some thread of, but we keep going, but we get through, but now I'm going to do this thing, but and that is always what inspired me, so I tried to include that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for being here. It is so awesome to hear your perspectives. I have not had a chance to read Samira's books yet, but you are on my TBR list. However, I have enjoyed Saba's books very, very much. And I actually just recently read All My Rage. And I know that you brought a lot of your personal experiences into that book. And so I was wondering, for someone like me, who is not brave enough to talk about some of her experiences yet or write about them, how did you find the courage to maybe finally write about your personal experiences and bring those into the page? And how did you kind of talk yourself into it? Because I feel like sometimes I need to talk myself into talking about what I'm going through in my own writing.
That's, first of all, such a courageous question, so thank you. One, it took a long time, 15 years, so time is very helpful. Two, it was fiction, and so whatever in the book is real is between me and a higher power, and that's it. And that actually provided a lot of comfort, because I knew that I could always count on that, as anytime anyone has tried to push or ask me what's real, what's not, my answer is, it's fiction. And that is sort of a gentle way of saying, none of your business. So I think sometimes approaching some of these things through fiction is a way for you to, again, create a buffer between yourself and what you're writing. I find that when you start writing nonfiction, it is such a different experience if you start with the fiction and you start with someone who, as simple as doesn't look like you, or doesn't like the same things that you like, or doesn't have the same whatever. That can be one little distinction that can allow you to be like, okay, I'm not writing about me. I'm writing about Ali, or I'm writing about Priyanka, or whoever, right? And that kind of allows you that space. But give yourself time and be kind to yourself. That was something I had to do, and I'm very fortunate. I had, my husband has always been a great supporter of me, and so when I would be like, I would literally throw down pages and be like, I can't do this, and he would very gently kind of pick them up and put them somewhere safe so I didn't light them on fire. And then he would be like, you can, but maybe not today. And that was really important to hear.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure. Aw.
Hey guys, I just have so Sabaa, I think I mentioned this to you in some passing comment on some kind of social media, but your book kind of broke me down and put me back together.
Aw.
And I think one of the important reasons why is it brought out a perspective of growing up South Asian American that most people don't understand, because we're seen as this like affluent, educated stereotype. And so there was a portion in both of your books that really talks about the darker side of growing up South Asian. And so for younger people in the audience, and then for people in our lives, like, how do we say to them, I know that sometimes it feels like you don't have a place in the conversation about race relations, but you do. And how do we get that message out to young people, and what is your recommendation?
I think this is you. That's a great question for you.
Yeah, it is a great question. I mean, I think that, I think part of the reason we're writing our books is because it is opening a dialogue and a conversation. I mean, honestly, like when we were kids, there were no South Asian writers or Muslim writers on our bookshelves. And, everywhere we go, we literally are telling South Asian kids, you don't have to just be a doctor. But I do think it's very important for our generation to speak to younger Desi kids and say, like, your voice is important, you need to contribute to this conversation. And we can understand both our privilege, and we do have privileges, but also understand the ways in which, for example, systemic racism or xenophobia affects us, and how we can potentially be a change in a more positive way. But I am really big on this, better together in a big way. Like, I think it is important for us, like what Sabaa did in her books, to talk about sort of intra-community issues like colorism, broadly, not just in South Asia, in broader Asia, and how we can address it. I think it's important for us to be honest with young people, and that's one thing that we can do, both understand our privilege, understand the ways in which the society is oppressing us, but also figure out ways that we can move forward together in community with other groups.
Thanks, guys. Love your dress.
I'm going to call this our very last question. I'm so sorry to everyone who's still
Can we take
in
one
line.
more?
Sorry.
Will the authors, are you willing to take one more?
Yeah.
We'll take yes. No,
Stay in
stay.
line. Stay in line.
I'll do mine real
Stay. We'll go fast.
Hi, I am a sophomore in high school, not in college yet, hopefully soon. And I was wondering, I'm sorry, I have to like bend down for this. I was wondering, there we go.
Yeah.
I was wondering, what kind of advice would you give to like a young, aspiring, I guess, activist?
I think this is you.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
She's just so good at this stuff.
So when I was in high school, I'm very much like a think local person. And so when I was in high school, for example, our teachers were picketing. I'm gonna give you two quick examples. Our teachers were picketing because they wanted like a better contract, and part of it was like class sizes, and having smaller class sizes helps me as a student too. Oh, yeah. And so as a way to support teachers, I like got the senior class, like a bunch of us, to wear these like black armbands, and that was like inspired by something that happened during the civil rights movement. And it was just like a small thing where it could be showing like some solidarity with a bigger issue. And I was also like the editor of my school newspaper, and I found that our administration was basically not listening to students, and was very absent. And I compared them to like, the Wizard of Oz, who's like the little person behind the curtains controlling everything. Yeah. And I wrote a whole op-ed about them, which they were really not that happy about. But that was a vehicle that I could use. I think it's really, really great to be able to do things locally within your school, even in small ways. Maybe it's helping people register to vote. Maybe it's finding that issue. I mean, if it's like book banning and censorship going on in your school, that is something that I see young people speaking out about a lot. So again, like just finding the little bit of an entry point and asking questions, pushing back, finding a little bit of that courage and hopefully gathering community with you and other like-minded young people who are like, yeah, we need to speak up about this because it's our life and it's our school.
Yeah, I think, so I did actually organize a gun rally that was, I guess, shut down or postponed due to administration. And that was something, and it was like end of last school year, like after Uvalde and all of that kind of thing. And the administration was not good at listening. I think I found a lot of just, they had their own set things to do in set places, and if I didn't fit in with that, it would just be overturned or whatever.
I'd like to cut in real quick. I think the authors have time to speak afterward, am I correct?
Sure, yeah.
But if we can have our one last question and answer.
Hello. Hi. Oh, okay. So I'm an aspiring writer, and I was just wondering how you write about being a brown person or how you write about being Muslim, because even though there are more work for diverse books, there's still kind of a lack. And so, like, I don't know who to write like, because there's, you know, there's like the 5 people, I'm like, these people are really great. But I don't feel like there's enough that I'm like, oh, this is what a Muslim in literature is supposed to look like. And so I was wondering, like, how were you able to write about yourself or your identity in a place where that's not the norm?
I don't think you have to write like any of us. I don't think you should, actually. I think that you have to find your own voice. That takes time. That takes just writing, literally as much as you can, as often as you can, just writing. But I do think that while it's really lovely to be inspired, I think that it is, we don't want to sound like each other because we want to be able to show that there is, we're not like a Borg Unimind, right? Sorry, that's a nerd Star Trek reference. But we're not, we're not one voice. We are many, many voices, and all of us are different from each other. One of the things that I found early on is I got this question, which was like, what does it feel like to, write a story that's, representative of Pakistanis? And I was like, no. That's not what this is. This book is not representative of anything other than the experiences of Noor and Salahuddin who are in the book. That is it.
Yes.
So maybe not putting so much pressure on yourself to be representative of everything and everyone. There's no like one Muslim story, right? There's no, and so just keep that in mind, and it just takes the pressure off, and it allows you to focus on writing what you want to write without thinking of everyone who's come before and everyone who will come after.
100%. There's only one person who can tell your story, and that is you. And we are very excited to read it. So we hope that you keep writing.
Please do it.
Thank you.
I would like to read it, yes.
Thank you so much,
everyone.
Thank you all.